Welcome to Dynamics Update, and this time is not a regular episode, not one where we talk about updates and so on, but this time we actually have a guest, me and Gustav. Hi, Gustav.
Hello, Johan.
And the guest today is Mötz Jensen. I'm hoping I pronounced that fairly correct.
That is good enough.
That's good enough
for me.
Good enough.
Yes, that's
Welcome,
that's fine.
Welcome. Pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
All right, so tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Mötz Jensen. I'm located here in Denmark, and I'm working for a small partner here in Denmark with the focus and specialty of Dynamics F&O, like we use and love. And if people maybe not know me all too well, I hope they know my little project that I have going on for the community. I am the maintainer and one of the founders of the Dynamics F&O.tools, the PowerShell module that will try to make your life easier and maybe save the day from time to time. So that's me.
Yeah, sure. So what is the background behind the D365 FO tools?
Yeah, so I had a colleague, and he's a dear friend of mine. We were starting around with 7.1, 7.2 with a new customer project, and we didn't participate in any of the testing, beta testing, or the TAP program or anything like that. So it was like a massive learning experience from us getting our hands dirty with the first version of 7.1, and we actually started on 7.1, and then they got upgraded to 7.2, and in all of that upgrade we had to like move around backpack files and all of that. And one of the blog posts that we had to read from Microsoft was taking 25 minutes just to read the blog post of how to export a database from a developer environment and push that into a tier 2 environment. It's like,
yeah, that was a mess going from the SQL to Azure SQL. I remember that one.
Yes, and that's that alone, that blog post alone made me and Mike look at each other and say, okay, this cannot be right. It's like, let's call all the guys we know in the world that works with Dynamics. And it's like, did we miss anything? Didn't we get the memo? Are you having some tools supplied by Microsoft? It's like, what are we doing? It's like, do we plan on having an entire community reading and like doing smaller scripts and documentation and video guides on how to work with this thing that we have to do all over again and again? And everyone says like, there isn't anything, and there isn't anything on the roadmap, and we don't expect anything to come in the near future. And we was like, okay, this is not gonna fly. And then we sat down and it's like, okay, what can we do? And at some point we said, we're gonna do a PowerShell module. None of us did that prior in our life, and we thought, how hard can it be? And then we set two goals. The first goal was we need to be able to import users into the database from outside of the application, right? Because we were running a implementation project, and we had several test runs with data and data migration, and we had to reset the users and all of that. So that was like, we need to be able to import users, and we need to be able to export to a backpack file. And when that works, we have a module. And it took like 4 weeks of hard work, and at some point he, and I'm sorry to say this on the record, he reverse engineered one of the DLL files, and he learned how to import users to the database, and they worked.
Yeah,
and from there it rolled. Yeah, that rolled from there. So
it's very cool.
So 4 weeks of hard work, and then it took us 4 more weeks to like understand how to do a module, and then we like in week 5 we said it's going to be open source. We need to share it with the community. It doesn't make sense that we keep it for ourselves, and we hope that people would like skip in and all of that. So that's the start story of F&O tools.
That's really cool. I know, seeing whenever a new version hits on Twitter, I see your fantastic promotion. Now we can do it. That's really cool. It's fantastic to see how it evolves from basically both with exactly what you're saying there, that both that new AX, the Rainier client, 7.1, all that stuff that was brand new when it was like, oh, it's just 2012 in the cloud. But no, it really wasn't 2012 in the cloud. It was
No,
a whole different thing.
It wasn't.
And this at the same time shifting all of that documentation to docs, which is, I mean, if you look at it now, it's a whole different ballgame of usability and actually being actual valid content as well on docs. Whereas I know as well in the beginning, a lot of stuff happened in the comments of those doc sections, but it's like this does not work. Okay, then it got changed, but otherwise it was just there for like 6 months until someone in that team got to it. So they were kind of doing two things at the same time, both upgrading the docs and implementing AX at the same time. So it was really
and supporting the customers as well, right?
Exactly. The big shift as well for them.
Yeah,
I mean, one thing here is that I've been working with Dynamics since, I think, not as long as you, but at least 8 dot something release. And I think that's the story of everything, is that there is no one who has been able to tell you how it's supposed to work, how you're supposed to do things.
Yeah.
As Gustav is saying, Docs is getting really, really good right now, but there are still things that this is how it should work, but then you realize that it's not how it actually works.
So my background is actually starting back in 2008. That's the first time I joined the partner channel here in Denmark. And my first version that I truly worked on was a AX 2009. And then I also had to support like older version than that. Yeah. So the oldest version that I ever worked with was 3.0. And then everything from that on and upwards I have touched more than once. So what I'm feeling about all of this is that the Yammer community is actually giving me way more value in terms of learning about how the product works and what other people are actually hitting as obstacles or roadblockers in their implementations.
Yeah, totally.
And taking that learning back to my customers, saying, okay, I know it might not be important now, but just note that if you are ever going to do, data management framework integrations, there is an issue or sometimes an issue that it doesn't pick up files, and the customer's like, we're not gonna hit that error. And it's like 3 months later, it's like, didn't you say?
Exactly.
So, I did.
Really
right.
I mean, one of the most important things with Yammer as well is, of course, there are a lot of people who has bumped into these issues, but it's also actually the only direct channel to someone working with developing the product.
Yeah, the product.
Because the problem is that if I've been in several fast track projects, and all of them always point you towards support. And the problem is that support does not know how things should be done. Support knows how to fix a specific problem. And that's really different because and you shouldn't actually expect support to be able to tell you how it's supposed to work, because that's not their job. Their job is to solve the issue as quickly as possible, even if it means taping things together, but it's actually not their work. It's not their job to tell you how it's supposed to work.
But I mean, that's also a shift, right? Because also in the beginning of these projects, a lot of that content did come from support, because that was like the only way to get something, to like, how am I supposed to make this work? Can you help me, put me into contact with product team? I had the same experience as you. I mean, a smaller project was the first one, not that much like input. Whereas nowadays you have so many channels. You have Yammer, you have, I mean, I was interested in one of these microservices that they put up, the visibility app, and just took me like a day to be on an inside Teams channel together with the product team, and just a lot of content that just. So I now have 3 different channels for just getting seeing what everyone else is doing. So that's perfect. But the problem is kind of it's too much, right? So then you start filtering out. So
or you might even lose out,
exactly.
Right? Because if you like have 10 sources of information for the same technology stack that you work in as your professional life and career, right? It's like you can only have so much focus on getting new content ingested into your life,
exactly.
while keeping your customers and everything else happy and working.
No,
right?
exactly.
It's like at some point it's gonna be information overload.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we just have to pick that the current project that I'm in, whatever is valid for that or makes sense for that project, I'm going to look into that. And then when we come to the next customer, the next implementation, like in 6 months' time, then we are missing out for 6 months of learning, right? And then we have a new steep learning curve because we have to catch up in another area that we haven't been looking into for the last 6 months, right? We always behind the game in terms of that we are not the all-knowing partner anymore because the application is so complex and massive compared to the previous versions.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And of course as well combined with the flexibility. Back in the day, if you didn't have a functionality, you built it, right? Now you have a number of ISVs and a lot of external applications, and the integration capabilities, not to say the least here. So the importance of knowing like a wider breadth of knowledge about the dynamic stack has never been more important than now. And now you have so many channels to like, where should I start, right? So that's where the community comes in, and like your tool here is one very, very good example of how it's actually people sharing now. So if you do have a problem, just post it in Twitter or in Yammer or somewhere, and you will most likely get an answer. It's harder to like, okay, and now I want to learn about this product. Where should I start? That's a little bit more complicated, but finding like an answer to a question, has this been done before? That's much easier today, I think, and hopefully the answer is good. I had an exact example as you did before, where just knowledge about a real like nasty bug, change tracking related in the DMF framework, made it very easy for people. Like, okay, I'm just gonna skip this in this version, and then in this version I'll jump on and I'll do this. Specifically, the ones that were in like a project. We can't do this now, so it's all about, okay, we know about this, and where we know that this is coming now, so that breadth of information is much easier now to kind of adapt to, where it was before was like, we don't know if this is going to come, we don't know when it's going to come, but we need it, then we'll build it. Now it's more of like, yeah, we know when it's going to come, when should we activate it, and how do we test it to make sure that it doesn't break when we go into production.
Yeah, the testing part is actually crucial, right? Because as a community, we all came from somewhat not so professional implementations, right? Because testing wasn't ever something that customers and partners were putting too much attention into. And then we hit like cloud first, more or less cloud only for the first few years, right? It's like, we need to test stuff, and it's like, yeah, we need to test it in a entirely different way than we used to, right? Because, and just as today, I had a colleague, he's like, with, explaining how it was in the old days, and you can see it in his eyes, he was missing the old days. I could open up the AOT, right click, create a job, and then I could fix stuff in production. It's like, I get it. I get what you are missing. But as a customer, I'm not sure that I'm missing that part. I know that I might, when I'm in a tight position, I might miss it in that specific moment. But I would appreciate people not being in my production environment and fooling around in the AOT and deleting tables or fields or. Yes, I have more than one story.
But it's not right. The right clicking part is not that easy. But maybe that's not on your priority to bring in the tools, the tool set to quickly create a model with an isolated runnable class, uploadable to LCS.
We actually had an idea. We actually had a bootcamp today where we were looking into the custom deployment script, right? And that's where my colleague was explaining how the old days were the great days. And it's like, I actually like the concept that someone else than me has to approve that the script is available, right?
Yeah, but that does. I think that might mean that a lot of people will have two accounts in AAD. One is the upload account, and one is the deploy account.
I know. And then we were discussing like if we were to have review, right? I would actually say that we need to have review on the test instead of the upload of the function.
Absolutely.
Right? Because getting the code uploaded, that's one thing. Running the code in test is another thing. But validating that the test, and all of the details written to the log is actually what we expected. That's where things are going to get messy, right? Yes. It's like, we got names and times and stuff like that, but who actually approved that the test is actually running as we intended to, right? Yes. And that's where things get ugly. Yeah. Right?
So the thing is that I don't have a developer background, so I haven't written a line of X++ in my entire life. which means that this is something that I get a bit scared about when they open up the possibility to run code directly in production. I think it was a very, very good thing. I sort of liken it to when you play bowling with kids, that you have these guardrails on the sides. That's a good thing. Guardrails are good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you could do the same thing just as easily now. It's just that your deployment window needs to be there in between. But you can just upload a runnable class. So it's all about testing and making sure that whatever you put in production actually works. This just makes it easier to put it in production. It doesn't really change anything else more than so it's all about your process and having your automated testing. But this way you could reduce the risk.
And automated testing is getting you so far, or can only get you so far, right? Because testing is like a story of its own, right? In terms of religion and how you approach it, right? So I personally are going for, like, when I have this discussion with the customers, like, I want you to identify at tops 20 processes that is either losing you money, customers, or brand value. When we nail those 20 and start testing those 20, then you can see how much effort we have to put into keeping those tests green at all times across all releases.
Yeah.
And the first customers, like, 20, that's not nearly enough. It's like, start with that and make that work in all scenarios, like all your scenarios for 20 different things or steps. It's gonna be a massive undertaking anyways, right?
But that's one thing that I've also realized is that once we start talking about testing and automatic test cases and all of that, and all, especially about the updating, regular updating on a very, very, very much tighter schedule than we used to, then the testing discussion almost went full on the other side, that we need to test every single little thing, but you haven't tested things before. So, and that worked. I mean, I'm all for testing, but you also, I mean, I usually say that I'm from the infrastructure side. So we have been doing Windows updates since about 2000s or so. And in the beginning, everyone was the same way. We need to test everything. We need to have a test set of computers that we run all of the patches on before we deploy them in production. But people fairly quickly realized that we can't afford that. We can't afford having people just doing tests every single month. That won't work. So, I mean, I think there is a really, really big point in what you're saying about the 20 most important business processes as well.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't need to test everything every single time, I would say. Because if you have a fairly long sprint release, then you will be using the product in UAT in that period. So you will notice things there as well.
Yeah, hopefully, right? I mean, this is like a religion, so it's always everyone. I would love to have 20 good tests for each process, automated for each release, preferably my daily heartbeat, like a nice little graph every morning that I can look at. Okay, everything is green, looks good. Now we can move ahead. That's great, and I think that's what everyone wants. It's just a matter how you get there. But I think specifically what I like about the 20 part is keep it. I mean, start with that, and then you can evolve, because it's always about, people try to build like 100% coverage automated tests from the start.
Yeah.
It's not easy. You have to start somewhere.
Nope. Yeah, and you know, we don't run the largest projects here in Denmark, right? We are a small partner. We know that. We know what league we are in, right? But when we're meeting the CIO and the CEO and the CTO, it's like they want to do testing. I say that's fair. I totally get it. But did you do any automated testing prior to this project? No. Okay. Let's just find 20. Which 20 should it be? It's like, do you lose money if it doesn't work? That's a good measurement, exactly. Right? Yep. Do you lose customers? That's a good measurement. Are you losing brand value? That's a good measurement. Yep. Anything beyond that, ignore that for now. You can take it if you want, but identify 20 that fits those 3, and then do a prioritization on that and say which one will cost us the most of either 3 measurements, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
And I actually have a customer that couldn't come up with one scenario where they could fit any of those three,
Wow.
because they were running such a simple setup in their ERP system. All the other important project processes were in the VMS system
Okay.
or in the production system, and so it's like then you should focus your efforts on those two systems that's
integration.
not living inside.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
That's true, because ERP is like, if it comes to finance, okay, I understand cash flow is super important, but it doesn't take you like, it's not a 10-second thing, right? You can live with something being broken for a little while, and that analysis is really important as well to come in, because everyone wants things to work all the time, absolutely. But when it comes to like prioritization in between, if you have a very, very tight ordering system and people are standing and doing nothing, if that flow stops, that's where you should invest all of your automated testing and all of your like testing efforts, because then you really lose money and lose efficiency. Whereas maybe invoicing those specific orders on a monthly basis isn't where you should invest all of your money doing automation. So it's a very good measurement, I think.
Yeah.
But that was one thing that happened to me at the customer as well, because I was in charge of setting up like the sprint release cycle and sort of some kind of process for deciding when to do the deploy and when to not do deploy. So I tried to explain to the people who was in charge that if we find an issue in regression testing at a very late stage in the deploy, then we basically have two choices. Either we deploy either way and decide that we can live with the issue and inform people that this specific process doesn't work right now. It's a bit broken. We are going to fix this as soon as possible. Or we halt the entire release, deploy the fix, and then we do another set of regression testing, which means that we will move things about 2 weeks further on, later than before. So you mean, and the question I got was, so you mean that we are deploying broken code? Yes, absolutely. And
that's actually funny that you mentioned that, Johan, because that's actually getting into some of the things that I dearly care about. It's like, I was super excited when I learned about the feature management module coming from Microsoft, right? And I saw, okay, now we can do feature flagging. That is gonna fix all of these things that we have in terms of, are we going live or we're not going live with semi-broken code, right? Because if every single new addition to the platform is getting behind the feature flag, you can actually disable the broken code and push to production and live with that for quite some time.
Exactly. That's a very important feature. We try to flag that one as well, as much as possible. Everything you put into the system should be parameter controlled or feature flagged or specifically by that like data area. Then if you have a lot of companies, you need to have a specific feature that needs to be localized. So that's exactly like you say. It takes a little risk off, but it's also very nice because then you can kind of reuse that feature later on in a different company, but you don't necessarily have to activate it now. So yeah, I completely agree. But the tricky part is knowing what features to deactivate if it's not off. So you need to have that mindset from the start when you design it. That's you can't think of a parameter 5 minutes before deploy because you're feeling scared. You have to think about it before you design it.
It's like you start with the security and then you start with feature flagging and then you start your development. But as a community, and I was hoping that Microsoft would come with a pattern for us to, piggyback on that. Here is how we envision that you can do feature flagging for customizations, and here are some guides. If you do it like this, we are gonna honor it, and you can honor it, and here's a dashboard. That was like, I was hoping for that. And that never came. It's like, okay.
No, now it's all about doing it parameterized in your own way, but at least the pattern is there for the new functionality, which helps us a lot in planning, testing, etc. So but exactly, I know what you mean. But speaking of that, the community-driven development, you wanted to discuss that a little bit as well, Johan, as a topic on the community.
So as I said before, I'm not a developer, but I have followed Mötz's project and some other GitHub projects. I'm a developer wannabe. I usually tell people I would like to have been a developer, but it never happened that way, and I'm not good enough to write code, so that no one will hire me to be a developer. But that's why I think it's a bit interesting. Okay, but that's why I think it's a bit interesting when Microsoft launched the community-driven development, which is basically a way to let partners and customers create, I would say predominantly fixes, and actually submit them to Microsoft and have them added to the Microsoft code base, vetted and tested and added to the code base. And I basically got a bit sad when I realized that I heard someone saying that no one is using this, which made me a bit sad, and I couldn't really understand why. So I was wondering if any of you guys had any explanation on it.
No, but I was thinking about what to answer. I mean, I share the opinion. I also feel a bit sad that it's not used. But it's Microsoft at their best today. They come a lot of new stuff, right? The community-driven development, a lot of new upgrading docs, the whole convergence thing, a lot of different things coming in the platform. Community-driven development being one, which I think is really good. The problem, I think, is with the execution of it. From my experience, I haven't really had much time to invest in it. But it's great if you're like an ISV and if you have the time and the resources to pull off the admin with related around that. If not, I can see that's where I haven't seen any statistics on it. I haven't heard that many people use it, so I'm kind of assuming here that it's not very well used. Maybe you know better.
I actually used it twice because I had some things that I wanted to adjust in terms of I'm depending a lot of OData in terms of either automating configuration after a data refresh or in terms of classic integration into the business processes. And the onboarding it was pretty easy, right? It's like getting the access, writing the emails. It was like less than 2 days. You were fully allowed to be in and look at the code, and you had to read all the documentation, and then you could start a new task or a new question, and then someone from Microsoft would come back to you and like try to extract from you what the purpose of your suggestion is. And if they approve it, then you're allowed to do a pull request, because they are actually running Git in this program and they're not running the classic TFS, right? So it's like that's
the irony.
That's the irony. And I love that you're laughing, Johan. It's like, okay, so here we can do pull request. Okay.
Exactly.
And then you do the change, and then they have a review process, right? And it works. I think that one of the issues is that the speed of the responses from Microsoft is too slow for a partner that might have an issue that is like, we are bleeding money at this point, or our customer is bleeding money at this point. We need to fix this, and we are actually willing to put in all our combined effort to fix it. And then you meet the wall of enterprise and like cloud scale. It's like, this needs to have a review process,
exactly.
And it might take a few months, right? And then the partner and customer might lose the faith of the program.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly my sentiment. That I think it's a very nice if you have a very long planning forecast, and you kind of do it because it's a very nice addition to the project, and from a community like improvement perspective, it makes a lot of sense. And I think, but that's where the problem comes in, that who will then pay for that developer's time? Is it, if it's not Microsoft, is it the partner or the customer? So I think that's where the underlying explanation of why you are sad, Johan, that it's not being used that much. But I would love to get some stats on it, because I think it's a really good idea. But it's not fixing a production go live stopping issue, of course, but it's improving on the product, and the more we can do that from a community perspective, the better, of course. But then, I mean, just as well, like post the code on like a blog post, and then if it comes in as a standard after 5 months, sure, that's great. But until then, people can still look at the code and implement it as a solution if needed.
Yeah, and what I think that what the offering from Microsoft actually solves is that some things you cannot fix in extensions,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Because if the issue is really in the kernel or in the base of the product, that's the only way to fix it for real, right? So it's actually the first place I go when I need to understand issues, right? Because the code is in clear text. I can do code search that is faster than my Visual Studio and all of that. So actually get into that and say, okay, I just want to find this class and understand how it's structured and whatever it's calling, right? And then if I have a support case, it's actually making it possible for me to go in, find the code as is, and actually share it with the support and say, this is the code. We expect it to be line 16. That's the issue, right? Please go and talk to the product group.
Yeah.
Right. And as you said, Johan, when we started the conversation, is that the support team isn't the product team.
No.
And that's fair enough, right? Because the support team is available 24/7. The product team isn't.
No.
And shouldn't be,
And
right?
I mean, sometimes I actually think that the support team has almost a harder time to get in touch with the product team that we do. But what you're saying now is actually we had a really funny incident. It could be something good to end with. When we were on version 8 or something, I actually had a colleague submit the support issue into Microsoft, because that was when the code was not sealed. So he was able to figure out all of the code and look at the entire code. And at some point there was a function that wasn't working, and he went into Microsoft's code and realized that it was actually commented out. The entire code block was commented out in Microsoft's code. So when he talked to support, they said, "So could you reproduce the issue?" The code is not there. It's it's gone.
Yeah.
But
how do you do it with? Please listen to me. It's gone.
Yeah. And that's also when you are in a tight situation where the customer is either losing money or the project is getting a lot of beating in terms of that we hit a roadblock, we cannot fix it, and it's actually jeopardizing the go live and stuff like that. Then it can be hard to talk with the support, because they have this checklist how to reproduce it, and it's like, okay, could you just please accept what I'm saying as the truth? No, please. Can you do a screen sharing? Yes, of course we can. It's
telemetry,
like,
please.
can I?
Yeah.
Yes. Couldn't I just record this, send it to you, and then you could ship it away to the product team, right? And that's where Jammer is actually a shortcut into the product group.
Absolutely,
right?
And specific Teams channels as well for some of the new products. They're really great, and you get a lot of a lot of love from Microsoft, where you can and from the community as well. So I think that's where it really shines up. So. Support has its, like you say, channels, but I have a lot of good support cases nowadays as well. It's all about the criticality and how time intensive it is, right? If you have time, just jump through the hoops and you will most often get a good answer.
Someone actually told me the other day that's submitting a support case is actually a skill. It's nothing. It's something that you need to learn, and it's something that you, after a while, you do it really well, because you know exactly what the questions
they expect,
what questions you will get back, and you can be one step ahead of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but it's actually funny, right? On the assessment that you have to provide for the go live, they actually state that. Does everyone on the team understand how to support or how to create a support ticket? It's actually part of the assessment, right?
And I think that's how it should be. It should be transparent. I remember a couple of years back, before the whole testing part, a client, when they did the estimation of the project, they included a specified amount of hours for bug fixing. And I thought that was great to do that. But I know the client was like, "But do you intend to ship a malfunctioning product?" But that's not how it works. You expect to have bug fixes, so always expect that something and implement that in your time plan and be transparent about it, because that makes more sense, because that's the reality, how it is with complex business critical systems.
I actually think that is sort of all we had time for today. So I would like to say thank you much for joining us today. It was really funny.
Thanks for having me.
It was a pleasure.
Yes.
It was my pleasure.
Yes. And to our listeners, have a great time until we hear you next. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.